Hey everyone, it's Lindsay, and welcome to the Dose of Bliss show, where I bring you words of wisdom from some of the most inspiring people that I know. If you're new here, don't forget to click the subscribe button. So today, we have a guest that is truly an angel on earth. Today, I have Gabriel Reyes. Gabriel is the president and founder of Reyes Entertainment. It's a boutique PR firm in Hollywood, and he's an expert in the Hispanic market. He's also recently an illustrator and an author, but what you don't know is that he is a very spiritual person. He had a near-death experience in his late 30s that forever changed his life. He learned how to love and to forgive and to heal from this experience, and I cannot be more excited to share his story with you today. Gabriel, thank you so much for coming today. Obviously now you're a big time person in Hollywood and super successful, but you had this crazy near-death experience. What happened?
Well, this was really quite a long time ago when I first moved to Los Angeles, or I had rented an apartment in the Silver Lake area, not far from Sunset and Silver Lake Boulevard, which I guess 20 years ago was probably not as gentrified as it is now. But it never dawned on me because I came from New York. And in New York, when you're in a bad neighborhood, you know you're in a bad neighborhood. In LA, it's a lot more, misleading. So I just, I saw these really pretty Spanish-style bungalows with rose bushes. And I thought, oh, well, this is cute. So I rented this apartment. And it was 3 months after, for my life as a publicist, I was an actor. So I still belong to SAG-AFTRA and all of that. And so I've done, films and some TV shows. And I was starring in a play at the Gay and Lesbian Center there that used to be there on La Brea. And so that particular night was a Saturday night. My brother had come from New York and was visiting. And he and my partner had come to see the show. After the show, we went to dinner. Then we came back to the apartment. I showered, and I put on this very baggy shirt and jeans. And my partner said, "Well, you look like a gangbanger." And we just laughed. Then later on that evening, my brother got a call from a friend of his who wanted to come over and visit, but he didn't know where we lived, so we gave him the address. Time went on. It was maybe 2 o'clock in the morning by this time. We were outside on the balcony looking out for my brother's friend. So as he drove by, we realized, oh, he's missed the apartment. So I better go down and get him. So I went downstairs and I started walking up the street to go get him. And I saw a group of young kids, maybe 4 or 5 of them, coming my way on the side of the street. Right at the very moment when they got close to me, I said hello. One of them said hello back. And then I heard a series of popping sounds. Pow, 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 pow. I was very confused. I didn't know what happened, except that I saw them scrambling, like they ran, they scattered in every direction. And I was aware of a stinging in my right side. And I realized then that I was shot, that I'd been shot. And it was it was really quite a shocking experience. It was the most shocking experience that I had ever gone through, and I didn't believe it for a second. I thought somebody was shooting fireworks, and I heard this scream coming from 2 blocks away. I didn't realize I was the one who was screaming, but it didn't seem to me like it was me. It was a very surreal experience. So I grabbed the side of my side and I ran back to my apartment yelling, "Call 411." I was so confused. And then an ambulance was taken to the hospital that night. I was in a kind of a state of shock going in the ambulance. I was put in the ER. This African-American gentleman showed up. He said he was going to take me to the X-ray room. When we got to the X-ray room, he asked me to get off the gurney and to stand in front of the X-ray machine. He said, pull down your pants and stand in front of the machine, X-ray machine, and hold out your arms. So I did that. I held out my arms and in front of the X-ray machine, and I happened to look, and across from me was a glass partition, and I could see my reflection in the glass. I could see that I looked like a crucifixion. And the wound was right below my rib on the right side. And there was blood that was running down my rib on the right side of my rib. And I looked at that and I was shocked because I thought, oh my God, you have crucified yourself. You have been crucified. You know, I really was a wave of realization came upon me that was like, you've been crucified, and you know, what does this all mean? It just launched a big torrent of thoughts and emotions from me. Once the X-ray was over, the gentleman came to me and he looked in my eyes and he said, "You are blessed." And that's all he said. And he put me back in the gurney, wheeled me back to my room, and then he left, and I never saw him again. I had a sedative, and I slept through the night, and I woke up the next day, like 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and it was there was a news story on TV about how many people had died that night as a result of gunfire in Los Angeles. I was shocked to hear it, but I was also glad and felt fortunate that I had survived, at least to this day. Then, you know, doctor came around to tell me that would have to hold me a few more days because there might have been some damage to my kidney. And, you know, by the next day, though, the blood had cleared, my urine was clear, and I was to go home. I went back home, and then the next Saturday night, for sure, gunshots again. And I was sitting in my apartment, just shaking like a leaf because there were gunshots, you know, down the street. You know, the same thing was happening. And I was really, really frightened and really an emotional mess. So I decided that I was going to, it somehow woke a big self-improvement, a desire for healing, and a desire to learn about self-improvement and self-help, so that I could help myself. So I started to go to therapy, and on top of that, I also started to look for anything that I could get my hands on that would help me to heal myself. At that time, and I'm so good friends with a woman who was the daughter of John Bradshaw. And John Bradshaw at that time had written a book called Heal Your Inner Child. And he was very popular, and he did a lot of these weekend intensives where he took you through meditations. He helped you to heal your inner child, because his whole tenet was that we all carry a child inside of us, and we need to be in touch with that child and heal whatever trauma a child might have gone through, et cetera, in order for us to become healthier adults. I was able to go and take that weekend intensive. And so during the course of, it was like 2 full days, Saturday and Sunday, all day, meditations, lectures, all kinds of workshops and things. He was taking us through a meditation on Sunday afternoon in which he asked us to picture ourselves as young children in our home and to call our mother in the room. So I did that. I went, you know, I pictured myself as a young kid in my house, and I called my mother into the room. But instead of my mother coming in, my father came in, and he was a young man. He wasn't the older father that I knew. He was a young man. There was no communication. There was no words. All communication was through feeling. And I was feeling that he needed my help, that he was somehow asking for my help. My father and I had a very difficult relationship growing up, and so there was that tension. But he needed my help. By this time, my father was already in a nursing home. He was about 85 years old. He was in a state of dementia and in a nursing home where he needed to get 24-hour care. And so I knew there was something in me that said that I needed to go home. I needed to go to Texas, and I needed to go see my dad. So, I went home. I went home in the next day, 2 days. I went home. When I got to down in South Texas, I picked up my mother. We went to the nursing home, and when we got there, there was an ambulance outside. They were taking my father to the hospital because he was in critical condition. And so we followed my dad to the hospital, and me and my mom sat with my dad that whole night. From the time that he got to the hospital till about 8 or 9 o'clock that night, I sat with him. I held his hand. I told him I forgive him. I'm okay. He could leave now. If he was in pain, he could leave. I did this for hours and hours and hours. About 9 o'clock that night, a friend of mine showed up to the hospital and said, "Why don't we go get a beer? You've been here all day, and you need to go away for a little bit." So we went, and as soon as we left, my mother stayed behind in the room. As soon as we left and we got to the bar where we were going to have a beer, somehow another friend of ours tracked us down and called that bar and said, "Your father just died." So I rushed back to the hospital. My dad was already dead by that time, and it was a bittersweet time because I felt like I had somehow helped him to go through, and I felt as though somehow our relationship had gone through another stage of healing by this process, by what happened, and I myself felt as though I had gained some level of healing through my relationship with my dad by this episode. And from then on, I was looking at reading everything I could find. I was really incorporated meditation into my routine, to my daily routine. I incorporated a lot of that search for self-love into my routine because I realized that a very difficult thing for me was to take responsibility for what had happened to me, because something like that, and people will say, "Well, you didn't make that happen. That happened out of the blue. Somebody came and shot you." But I had to take responsibility for whatever role I had played in that, and it was very difficult. Right, and so what I discovered was that I unwittingly had carried a lot of self-loathing in my life. Growing up as a gay kid, in a mainly Latino household, in a mainly Latino, surroundings, there was a lot of stigma. And this was back in the 70s, where it wasn't such a joyful thing when your son comes out. It didn't have the kind of acceptance that it has now. It was still very difficult to come out as gay. And I certainly, growing up in a small town, really endured a lot. And not just from things, but also from my own parents. And I realized that what it led me to the discovery that I had internalized a lot of that self-loathing. And so and somebody who would have known me and met me at that time would never have guessed that, because I've always been kind of an upbeat, optimistic kind of person. But these are the unwitting, the emotions that we carry without knowing. Maybe this was internalized for me very early on in my life, and I wasn't aware that I was carrying this, and somehow that energy played a part. I had to delve deep into that and really go into and do a lot of crying, do a lot of discovery, do a lot of self-discovery, do a lot of crying, do a lot of really delving deep into my childhood, all the different episodes, what stuck with me. You're kind of a detective. You're going inside yourself and you're looking for clues, and you're looking for different ways in which you can, maybe take this little thread and unravel it and have it reveal something for you. And so that was a process that took me a long time. And I still do it. I still meditate just about every day, and I still do my search for and all those and all that work that was triggered by that episode. And it took me about a year, I had, like I said, I had therapy, and then on top of that, I did all my own work. And it took me a long, long time to get past that event and return to some kind of normalcy.
It's so interesting. So a lot of people will say they had some sort of life-changing experience that made them spiritual. What in that moment, like, it really sticks out to me that you said it felt like a crucifixion. Like, why in that moment, like, did you feel like it was more spiritual than, an average person might just be standing there in the hospital following what they say and not going deeper? What inside you made you go deeper?
It was it was like a splash of cold water, I have to say, because just that instant in which I saw that reflection on the glass, it was like boom, a door opened in my mind and my heart, and it was a huge realization of what I was looking at, and I could not look away, meaning I could not in my mind look away and put that aside and said, oh, that's just a reflection on the glass. I couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
I was in such a frame of mind that I knew that this meant thing, and this was a clue for me to follow, in which I did. Mm-hmm. And like I said, it took me, I cried and cried and cried and cried for weeks and weeks and weeks, and there was a lot of emotion that was pent up, that was released, and so that was really the trigger to be able to start to look at places where I had pent up emotion, places in my body, episodes that I had pushed down, that I had said, oh, it doesn't really matter, but it really did matter. Because a lot of times when we get offended or when people insult us, we try to belittle it, or we try to make less of it and say, oh, it didn't matter. I don't really care, but you really do care, and it really does matter. And those are the times, and that's really what not the only thing that I learned, but a big part of what I learned is, you need to stand up for yourself. You need to know who you are. And if someone, is not giving you your space or is not giving you what you need, then you need to call it out. You need to, you need to do something about it and not pretend that it's okay, because it's not okay. And I think that that's what a lot of people do when people who are people pleasers, you've heard that term. There's a lot of people who are out there just trying to please you. They're just trying to please you. And, if you insult them or you say something, they say, oh, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. They don't want confrontation. They don't want to, make something happen, something bad happen. So they will quiet their own emotions down for the sake of having no confrontation. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the big lessons that I took away.
Yeah, that's something that I have within myself as well. It's like you don't realize all those little times you're doing to that stuff. You're telling that little voice inside you that it doesn't matter, and you're not trusting your own voice for whatever reason, when sometimes you just have to express how you feel. And if whatever someone reacts, you can remove them from your life if you have to. You can't be afraid of that confrontation, because when you have that, you end up having more choices and control over your life. But somewhere along the line, when you're a people pleaser, or for whatever experience you have, you somehow learn to suppress that, and you don't even know you're doing it,
That's right. That's right. And I know that I was doing that. I know a lot of people who do it. And, that was really one of the things. But, the other thing was that I was able to really just, practice it to the extent that it really allowed me to see that we are, in a way, we haven't yet reached full potential spiritually, that we, especially using our bodies and using our souls to connect in an energetic way. I really learned a lot of techniques that I use for myself in order to tap into that dimension that is not here in my mind, in my head, but is down here in my gut and in my stomach and in my heart. So sometimes when you meditate, you're inside your head, and your head is telling you all these things. But the meditation that works for me is for me to stop the chatter in my head, and for me to go down into my heart and my stomach, and then just feel. And then just feel and feel and feel, and let those feelings come up and start to inform you of who they are, what they need, what they want, and how you can work with those feelings in a more authentic way. A lot of the times when I first started, I realized that I wasted a lot of time just being in my head,
Mm-hmm.
meditating in my head, and going through the chatter in my head, and thinking that that was meditation. But that's not meditation. Meditation is really going down into a deeper level of emotion and feeling that doesn't have anything to do with the intellect.
Mm-hmm.
And so I learned all that, and
And was that
those are techniques that I follow.
was that like, so when you did that meditation of your inner child and you saw your dad come in, was that one of the first times that you experienced the meditation? And is that kind of what opened you up to being like, there's something more here?
It was not one of the first times, but it was a very strong. It was very strongly the way that it was experienced, and there was no doubt in my mind. I didn't think, I'm just making this up. There was no doubt in my mind that there was an energy that I tapped into that allowed me to see that allowed me to feel that. And so it did give me a deeper understanding of how deep what can go in order to get deeper in this dimension and maybe other dimensions, to get to a place where, things are manifesting, or where things are being created, or where, information can be imparted that might not be in your head.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't the first time, but it did give me a much deeper understanding.
Yeah, you were able to connect with your dad and almost have this forgiveness for him, and he was able to even say sorry in his own way without even talking to him. And that's what I really take away, because I truly believe and feel that within you, that you just were like, I know you were able to pick up on what your dad was thinking and feeling, because at the end of the day, everybody really is love, and it comes from, and obviously when you're a people pleaser like me, you understand there's things that happen in people's lives that make them be the way that they are, and you always hope that they become open the way that we are. And then there came that point for you where you were able to connect him, where he didn't have these barriers to express what he was really truly feeling, which is kind of like where the soul lives, that that universe spiritual thing where everyone has that higher level.
It was the authentic.
Yeah.
It was his authentic soul, and not the person he was when he was alive.
Mm-hmm.
It was, it was a bigger thing. It was, his soul, really. So it was a different energy than, say, the energy of my father as a human being.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like what
So
validates that is when you did see him and you talked to him and told him it's okay, and you forgive him and you love him. And then as soon as you left the room, he chose to die, kind of as like a validation, as like, what you're feeling and experiencing was me. I am listening to you, and I want you to know that I'm controlling this right now, and I'm going to show it to you this way.
right. It was very much like that. It was very much like that. So I didn't feel, of course I felt grief, but at the end I felt like there was some kind of closure that had happened. And so that helped on the way to the healing. But there was really much more. It really all came down to me.
Mm-hmm.
And what were the baggage that I was carrying, and how I was going to work that out. And so, it was a great trigger that allowed me to then continue to do the work.
Mm-hmm. So knowing what you know now, what would your advice be to your younger self?
My advice would be to go for it more, go more for your dreams, go more for what you really want. Don't settle for what you think you can get, and don't listen to others. I really want to encourage people to look at the what you call quote unquote tragedies, or quote unquote bad things that happen in your life. Take a deep look at those, because you might be able to discern some wisdom from that. Regarding yourself, and maybe some things that you might even be aware of, that you might be, putting out some energy that will attract those things. So, I would say look closer at the negative things and see if you can glean some wisdom for yourself from those negative things, and take some lessons away.
Yeah, use them to your advantage. It's speaking to you, and the only person that needs to listen is you.
Exactly.
So I also mentioned at the beginning that you're also an author, and so I just wanted to share with everybody your books, which, by the way, he illustrated. Look how beautiful these are. Can you tell everyone a little bit about these books and where they can find them?
Thank you. Well, through my life, I've always drawn, and painted, and don't have any training, but I just love it. It's a hobby of mine. You can see behind me, I have my drafting table with all my
Yeah, I was
art
going to ask
supplies.
about that. Yeah.
So during the pandemic, I went back, there was a lot of time. My business suffered, and there was a lot of time during the pandemic. So I went back and I took a look at all the drawings that I had, and I decided that I was going to start to compile them into an actual book. And I was going to write little stories for each one of those illustrations. And so I began to compile them. I colorized them. I, illustrated them. And then I started to compile them and started to write. So the first thing I noticed was that I had drawn a lot of women. So I decided to compile a book on strong women. And then I called it, Glamour, Grace, Glamour, and Grit, an illustrated anthology of powerful women. And so I created a story in the first person for each one of the women to speak to us in their first person about who they are, who they were, and what they accomplished, what their situations in life were. And they're from, women from all over the world, from every situation. And then I did a second book that I wrote because I have such an affinity for vampires. I love vampire books and vampire films, and I noticed that I had written and I had drawn a vampire story. So I decided that I was going to write it. I was going to take a look at all the different drawings, and I was going to craft a little story around them with all these different characters. And so I did. I crafted a little story about these vampires, and then I called it Time Travelers, a Vampire Story. And they're both on Amazon now. And I'm working on another one now that is going to be a collection of short stories and essays.
That is so beautiful. I'm going to link that below. I really want everyone watching to really think about what today's interview is about and these books, because I love having this show because there's truly angels on earth, and you really have to look with your soul. And this guy is one of those people, and you don't come around them. And that's why I made the show, because I meet so many people, and we're always going through the world, and we might not know we're busy. And people are like, where are the good people? And I'm like, I'm meeting them. They're here. And he's one of them. And like, I can pick up this book. I mean, I feel it right now talking to you, and I feel that energy that you're putting out. Like the first time I met you, it was like, you instantly knew my soul, and I don't have that experience, so.
That is so sweet. I love the way you put that. Thank you so much. That's very sweet.
No, I'm blessed. Like the guy says, I'm blessed to know you, and you're blessed. And I'm so happy to share this story, because there is this magic in the world that we can tap in. And for so long, I had felt like I was the only person who saw this. And as I've gotten older, we kind of find each other. And so I hope, whoever finds this video, you're obviously looking for it too, and you found us. And
yes,
I want to share that with the world, because it is, like you said, it's like within you all along.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate all your words.
Oh, thank you. And thank you guys, everyone, for watching. Again, if you want to follow him and find his books, I have linked everything below. We also have another interview that we had done back in the day, which I will also have linked and pop up on the screen if you want to learn the difference between real news and fake news. He has a spiritual take on that as well. Thank you so much for coming to the show, and thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Thank you so much, Lindsay.